Today we're going to get into Chapter 7, covering sections 1 and 2 over square roots and cube roots. This section is not very difficult because you will have access to a calculator, so really just being able to maneuver the calculator, understanding what a square root and a cube root are, this should be a basic section for you. So let's go ahead and jump into what this is. Obviously, to find square roots and cube roots, we have to know what each one means. So these are your definitions for each. They are a little confusing when you just read them. They'll make a little more sense whenever you look at examples. It says a square root of a number is a number that, when multiplied by itself, equals that number. So basically you're going to have a square root symbol and a number underneath it. And you're trying to find what number multiplies by itself to get that number that's under the square root symbol. And we'll talk about that a little more to make sure you understand. And cube root, all that is a number. The cube root of a number is a number that, when multiplied by itself and then multiplied by itself again, equals that number. So this time, instead of multiplying it by itself twice, you multiply it by itself 3 times, and that is your cube root. So square is 2, cube is 3. So here are your symbols for each one. So you have your square root symbol, which is this, and your cube root is the same thing, it's just got a 3 in the corner. So basically what's going to happen is you're going to have a number under here, under these square roots and cube root symbols, and you're trying to find what, like for example, whatever number is put here, you have to figure out what number multiplies by itself to equal that number. And then here, whatever number's under here, you have to figure out what number multiplies by itself 3 times to equal that number. Okay, so that's what we're looking at with this. One important note that you need to understand, because this will help you as you solve for like equations later on in this slide. It says, taking the square root of a number and taking a number to the second power, or the power of 2, are opposite operations. The reason that is important, and I'll explain that later, but just how addition and subtraction are opposites. Multiplication, division. Square root and exponent of 2 are opposite operations, and I'll show you how we're going to use that later on. Same with cube root. Finding the cube root of a number and taking a number to the power of 3, those are opposite operations. Okay, so I'll show you what that means or how we'll use that, but that's very important to know moving forward. Okay, so let's look at some examples of this. So let me get one of the most common calculators that you all might have, so you can understand the way to type them in. Which obviously some of these you will just be able to do in your head. But here it says find the square root or cube root. So if we're finding the square root of 25, we're basically saying what number multiplies by itself to get 25. Some of you can do that in your head. That's great. Which, if you think, what times itself equals 25, that would be 5. Because 5 times 5 equals 25. So your answer for square root of 25 would just be 5. And right now I'm using the TI-30XA. The way you would type that in, if you look on this calculator, obviously you need to turn it on, you would type in your number first, and different calculators are different. Sometimes you have to hit the square root symbol first, sometimes you have to type the number first. Here I'm going to type 25, and then I have to look for the square root symbol, which in this calculator is right beside the division sign. So all you do is you type in 25, hit that square root symbol, and it'll automatically pop up and tell you that your square root of 25 is 5. Okay, so some can do that in your head, some you just have to type that simply in the calculator. It's the same thing, it'll work out the same way. So this one is the cube root of 8. So this is saying, what do you multiply by itself 3 times? So what times what times what equals 8? And again, some of you can do that in your head. Some may not be able to. When I type this in, again, I'm going to hit 8. This one's going to be a little different. Your cube root symbol is, after you type in your number, you have to hit second, the green second button, and then 0. Because if you look above the 0, there's that cube root symbol. Okay, so once you do that second 0, you'll see 2 is your cube root of 8. So what that means is 2 times 2 times 2 equals 8. So that's how we're getting these numbers. And this is where, obviously, you'll need to be able to have access to a calculator, because like these, you won't just be able to do in your head, 12.25. But again, all I'm doing, typing in the number 12.25, and wants the square root of it. So I hit that square root symbol right beside the division sign, and that shows me that 3.5 is my answer. And you can always check that, because you know square root is what number multiplied by itself. So I just do 3.5 times 3.5, and it should give me 12.25, which it does. Okay, last one, negative 27, they want the cube root. So 27, I'll type that in, hit the negative sign, which is down here, make sure I hit that. And then again, I'm going to hit the cube root. So that means I hit second 0, and that'll show me that negative 3 is the cube root of negative 27. So that means negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 gives me negative 27. Okay, so that's a very simple process. All you're doing is making sure you can plug those in the calculator correctly and understanding what a cube root and square root mean. Okay, so I want you to try these ones on your own. Pause the video, try this, and then we'll go over these together. So hopefully you've tried these. I'm going to go ahead and talk about what each would be. So again, for square root of 2.25, I'm just going to type in 2.25, hit the square root button, and you'll see that 1.5 is your square root. And that means if I type in 1.5 times 1.5, I should get 2.25, which I do. Next, 1. So we want the cube root of 1. So what times itself 3 times equals 1. So I type in 1, second 0, and that'll show me that the cube root of 1 is just 1, which makes sense because 1 times 1 times 1 equals 1. Next one, square root of 4.84. 4.84, type it in, hit the square root button. That is 2.2. Last one, 343 negative, make it negative. And I want the cube root, so I hit second 0, and that shows me that negative 7 is the cube root of negative 343. So that means negative 7 times negative 7 times negative 7 gives me negative 343. So that's a very simple process of just finding those using the calculator. You'll have to go further and be able to use those to simplify expressions and also solve for variables, which we'll talk about. So for example, here, it says simplify the expression. You haven't discussed it, but knowing that square root is the opposite of power of 2 exponent, just understand that's on the same level when it comes to order of operations. So the first thing you need to take care of when you're solving this is this square root. So I'm going to find what the square root is. So 36 square root is 6. So that means when I work that out a little bit, it'll be 5 in place of 36. Or square root of 36 is 6. So this is my new expression that I'm going to work out. If 5 and 6 are right beside each other like that, that's multiplication. So you have to just multiply those before you add 7. So 5 times 6 is 30. Bring down my plus 7. 30 plus 7 is 37. So your final answer for part A would be 37. Okay, perfect. So now 37 is my answer to part A because they're just following order of operations. Same thing here. We're going to follow order of operations. So first thing I need to take care of is the cube root of negative 216. So I'll type in 216, make it negative, hit second 0, and that'll show me that my cube root of negative 216 is negative 6. So what that'll look like is I'm going to bring the 2 down, or bring the 2 over, haven't used it yet. In parentheses, I just found the cube root of negative 216 is negative 6, and then minus 3 on the end. So don't get this confused, because this was right beside each other. Just because it's a minus doesn't mean it's subtraction. These are being multiplied. So 2 times negative 6 is negative 12. Bring down my minus 3. Negative 12 minus 3 is negative 15. Okay, so your final answer there should be negative 15. These are just order of operations, making sure you're following those steps. But main thing is, whenever you have these, you need to take care of your square root and cube root first, and then you just follow your order of operations from there. Okay, when you try these ones on your own, hopefully you pause the video and try these. This first one, we have 12 minus 3 square root of 25. So that means first thing we need to take care of is this square root of 25. So I'm going to bring over 12 minus 3, and then the square root of 25, if you type that in your calculator, you should get 5, because 5 times 5 equals 25. Okay, next we have a subtraction or a multiplication. We need to do the multiplication first, so I bring down the 12, and then negative 3 times 5 is negative 15, or minus 15. Then lastly, we subtract these and we get negative 3. So your final answer should be negative 3. Next one, we have 18 minus 4 cube root of 8. So first I'll do the cube root of 8, which is 2. And again, on your calculator, you just type 8, the second button, and 0, and that'll give you the cube root of 8, which is 2. Then we do the multiplication, 18 minus 8, and then 18 minus 8 is 10. So your final answer should be 10. Alright, so that's just solving expressions using your order of operations. And this is what I was talking about at the beginning. You'll also need to be able to solve for x using those opposite operations of square root and power of 2 or power of 3. So let me show you what I mean by that. First, this is just like before, like when you solve for x. You need to get x by itself. In this case, you might have x squared by itself or x to the third by itself. Either way, that's what you need to get by itself, and then we'll deal with the exponent. So here, we already have x by itself, so we're fine. It's x squared equals 49. So, I said that square root and power of 2 are opposite operations. So we're going to use that idea like we do before, where if we want to get rid of the power of 2, we have to do its opposite operation to both sides. So what that means is, the opposite operation of the power of 2 is to take the square root. So I'm going to take the square root of the left side and the square root of the right side. What that does is, because these are opposite operations, the power of 2 and the square root cancel out, leaving you with just x, which is what we want. We want x by itself. So then you take the square root of 49, and that gives you what x equals. So here, square root of 49 would be 7, because 7 times 7 equals 49. So that's your final answer. X equals 7. Okay, so that is your final answer, and that's the answer to what you do, is you take the opposite operation. Next one, x to the third minus 12 equals 52. Okay? Again, first thing you need to make sure is the x to the third is by itself, which is not here. So first you need to move that minus 12, which hopefully we remember from chapter 1. You're just doing the opposite, which is plus 12 on both sides. Cancel, cancel. We bring down x to the third equals 64. Okay, so now that x to the third is by itself, we use that idea that the opposite of x to the third power is to take the cube root. So that's what I have to do to both sides in order to get rid of that exponent of 3. I'm going to take the cube root of that side and the cube root of that side. Okay, so what that does is, again, power of 3, cube root, cancel, which is what we need, because then that leaves x. So whatever the cube root of 64 is what x will equal. And on your calculator again, you take 64, plug it in, or type it in, hit second, 0, and that'll give you the cube root, which is 4. And you can always check that answer like we talked about before. You take that, plug it back in. So that would be 4 to the third power minus 12 equals 52. 4 to the third power, you type that in your calculator, is 64. Minus 12 equals 52. 64 minus 12 is 52, and that equals the right side. So that means it is the right answer. Okay, so that is how we're getting this. You have to pay attention to your opposite operations, which means the power of 2. If you have the exponent of 2, the opposite operation is the square root. If you have the power of 3, opposite operation is the cube root. Alright, so when you try these two on your own, pause the video, try these. Hopefully you've had a chance to try these. So here we have x to the third by itself, so I can go ahead and do the opposite operation to get rid of the power of 3. The opposite operation of the power of 3 is the cube root. So I take the cube root of the left side, and I have to do the same thing to the right side. So the square, or the power of 3 and the cube root cancel. Leave me with x. So then the cube root of 27, what times itself 3 times equals 27? That would be 3. So x equals 3 here. Okay, part B, x squared plus 6 equals 42. First we need to get x to the second by itself. So in order to do that, we subtract 6. It'll be x squared, or x to the second, equals 36. So again, once that x to the second is by itself, you have to use opposite operations to get that by itself. The opposite of power of 2 is to take the square root. The opposite is to take the square root on both sides. The power of 2 and the square root cancel out, leaving you with x. The square root of 36, meaning what times itself equals 36, that would be 6. 6 times 6 equals 36. Okay, so the main idea, that pretty much covers what we're doing in this chapter. The main thing to remember is, first of all, you have to make sure you understand square root and cube root. Square root is whatever number multiplied by itself to get the number under the square root symbol. Cube root is whatever number multiplied by itself 3 times to get that number under the cube root symbol. Another very important idea, like I mentioned in the slide, the opposite of square root is the power of 2. Those are opposite operations. The opposite of cube root is power of 3. Those are opposite operations. Those are very important to use when you have problems like this where you have to solve for x. Okay, so hopefully you understood that section. Hopefully that helped you out a little bit. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching.